Today, celibacy is often associated with religious devotion, personal choice, or specific cultural traditions. Monks, priests, and other spiritual leaders may choose to remain unmarried and abstain from sexual relationships for a higher purpose. But what about the very first humans? Long before temples, churches, or written laws existed, did ancient humans ever choose not to have sex? Was celibacy even possible in a world where survival depended on having children to continue the family and the tribe? At first glance, the answer might seem obvious. Ancient humans lived in a dangerous world filled with predators, disease, harsh climates, and constant uncertainty. Life expectancy was much shorter than it is today, and every new child increased the chances that a family, and even an entire community, would survive into the next generation. So why would anyone choose not to have children? The truth is more complex than many people realize. Although there is no direct evidence that prehistoric humans practiced celibacy in the organized religious sense we know today, there are good reasons to believe that not every adult had children or engaged in sexual relationships throughout their lives. Some may have lost partners and never remarried. Others may have devoted themselves to hunting, protecting the group, caring for relatives, or fulfilling special roles within their communities. Illness, injury, infertility, or personal circumstances also meant that not everyone became a parent. As human societies became more organized, new beliefs and traditions emerged. Thousands of years later, some cultures began to value celibacy for spiritual, philosophical, or social reasons. What may have started as individual circumstances eventually became a deliberate choice in certain civilizations. So, was celibacy present among ancient humans? The answer depends on which period of history we are talking about and what we mean by the word celibacy. In this documentary, we'll separate myth from evidence, explore what archaeologists and anthropologists have discovered, and uncover whether choosing a life without sex or marriage existed long before recorded history. For the first humans, survival was never guaranteed. Every sunrise brought new dangers. Food had to be found, predators had to be avoided, and children needed constant protection. Unlike many animals that could survive on their own within months, human children remained dependent on adults for many years. This made family one of humanity's greatest survival tools. A child without parents or caregivers had very little chance of reaching adulthood. Likewise, older parents depended on younger generations to help gather food, defend the community, and continue the tribe after they were gone. Because of this, having children wasn't simply a personal decision. It was essential for the survival of the entire group. Imagine a small tribe of only 30 people living thousands of years ago. If few children were born over several years, the group could slowly disappear. Hunting accidents, disease, childbirth complications, harsh winters, and attacks from predators claimed many lives. Without enough new members, the tribe might eventually become extinct. This is why reproduction played such an important role in prehistoric life. In many ways, the entire community became one extended family. This doesn't necessarily mean every adult had children. Some individuals may never have found a partner. Others may have lost a husband or wife early in life. Some may have been unable to have children because of illness, injury, or infertility. These situations likely existed just as they do today. However, there is no archaeological evidence that prehistoric hunter-gatherers created organized traditions where healthy adults deliberately remained celibate for religious or spiritual reasons. That idea appears much later in human history. As human societies became larger and more complex, entirely new ways of thinking began to emerge. Some people started giving up marriage, not because they couldn't have families, but because they believed they had discovered something even more important. For tens of thousands of years, ancient humans lived as hunter-gatherers. Their daily lives revolved around one goal: survival. Finding food, raising children, protecting the tribe, and adapting to nature demanded nearly all of their time and energy. In such a world, there was little evidence that people voluntarily chose lifelong celibacy as a recognized way of life. Then, everything began to change. With these changes came something entirely new. People now had more time to think about questions beyond survival. Why are we here? What happens after death? Who created the world? These questions gradually gave rise to organized religions, temples, and spiritual leaders. For the first time in history, some individuals began dedicating their lives not to hunting or farming, but to serving what they believed was divine. In several ancient civilizations, religious duties became so important that certain people chose to remain unmarried or avoid sexual relationships for periods of time. They believed that discipline, self-control, or ritual purity helped them focus on their spiritual responsibilities. In many ancient religions, priests and priestesses married and raised families. Others practiced celibacy only during specific ceremonies or seasons. Lifelong celibacy was the exception rather than the rule. One of the earliest well-documented traditions of celibacy appeared in parts of ancient India. Some Hindu ascetics chose to leave ordinary family life behind, believing that controlling physical desires allowed them to seek wisdom and spiritual enlightenment. Centuries later, similar ideas appeared in Buddhism, where monks and nuns embraced celibacy as part of their commitment to a monastic life. Elsewhere, some philosophers in the ancient Greek world argued that mastering one's desires could strengthen character and improve self-discipline, though not all of them practiced celibacy themselves. These traditions emerged thousands of years after the earliest humans first walked the earth. This tells us something remarkable. Celibacy was not born out of humanity's struggle to survive in the wilderness. It emerged as societies became more complex, allowing some people to devote their lives to spiritual, philosophical, or religious pursuits instead of the daily struggle for survival. But this raises another fascinating question. If prehistoric humans did not have organized celibacy, although there is no evidence that prehistoric hunter-gatherers practiced organized celibacy, that does not mean sexual relationships happened whenever people wished. Life in the ancient world was demanding. Food was scarce, journeys were exhausting, and danger was everywhere. These realities often shaped when people could have children and when they could not. Anthropologists studying traditional hunter-gatherer societies have found that many communities observed periods of temporary abstinence for practical reasons. One of the most common reasons was childbirth. After a baby was born, many mothers breastfed their children for several years. In a number of traditional societies, couples waited for a period before having another child. This helped ensure that the newborn received enough care and nutrition before another pregnancy began. The exact customs differed from one community to another, but the goal was often the same: protect the health of both the mother and the child. Long hunting expeditions also created natural periods of separation. There were also times of illness and injury. A person recovering from a serious wound, disease, or difficult childbirth was far more concerned with staying alive than with starting a family. In such moments, survival always came first. Seasonal conditions may have influenced family life as well. Harsh winters, droughts, or times of famine placed enormous pressure on entire communities. When food became scarce, every member of the tribe had to concentrate on gathering resources and protecting those who were already alive. Some researchers also believe that social customs may have influenced relationships. Different groups likely developed rules about partnerships, marriage, and family life to reduce conflict within the community. These customs would have varied greatly from one region to another, and because prehistoric people left no written records, many details remain uncertain. This is an important reminder. Not every question about ancient humans has a complete answer. Archaeologists uncover bones, tools, shelters, and artwork, but thoughts, conversations, and personal choices rarely survive for thousands of years. Scientists must carefully piece together the evidence while recognizing the limits of what can be known. Temporary abstinence for practical or cultural reasons is very plausible. Organized lifelong celibacy, however, does not appear in the archaeological record until much later, after the rise of settled civilizations and organized religions. So if celibacy became an accepted practice only in later history, what do the world's oldest religions and philosophies actually teach about it? As villages grew into cities and civilizations emerged, human life became more than a daily struggle for survival. For others, mastering that desire became a path towards spiritual growth. One of the earliest traditions to encourage celibacy appeared in ancient India. Thousands of years ago, some Hindu ascetics chose to leave behind ordinary family life. They lived in forests, mountains, or remote places, dedicating themselves to meditation, prayer, and the search for spiritual truth. They believed that by controlling physical desires, they could focus entirely on understanding the divine and attaining liberation. Centuries later, Buddhism adopted a similar practice. However, it is important to understand that these practices applied mainly to monks and nuns, not to everyone. Most ordinary people married, raised families, and continued society through the generations. Celibacy was viewed as a special calling rather than a universal requirement. In the ancient Mediterranean world, ideas about self-control also developed. Some Greek philosophers argued that a wise person should not be ruled by desire. They believed that discipline over one's emotions and appetites helped a person live a balanced and virtuous life. Although not all of them practiced celibacy, they valued self-mastery as an important virtue. Later, Christianity introduced another understanding of celibacy. Jesus himself never married, and the Apostle Paul wrote that some people were especially gifted to remain unmarried so they could devote themselves more fully to serving God. At the same time, the New Testament also presents marriage as honorable and good. In other words, celibacy was described as a calling for some, not a command for everyone. Across different cultures, one idea kept appearing. Celibacy was no longer simply about avoiding sex. It became a symbol of discipline, sacrifice, and complete dedication to a higher purpose. But this raises one final question. At first glance, celibacy might seem to go against human nature. After all, humans, like every other species, have a biological drive to reproduce. Sexual attraction plays an important role in forming relationships and ensuring that each generation gives rise to the next. We don't live by instinct alone. Unlike most animals, humans can think about the future, weigh consequences, follow moral principles, and choose long-term goals over immediate desires. This ability to make conscious decisions has helped our species survive for hundreds of thousands of years. History provides countless examples. Some people have chosen marriage and family, seeing it as their life's purpose. Others have chosen celibacy so they could devote themselves completely to religion, philosophy, scientific discovery, or serving their communities. Both paths have existed throughout history. Scientists who study human behavior explain that sexual desire is a normal part of human biology. However, they also recognize that self-control is one of the defining characteristics of our species. The same mind that feels desire is also capable of deciding when, how, and whether to act on it. This ability to choose has shaped civilizations. It has allowed people to build families, create laws, establish religious communities, and pursue goals that extend far beyond their own personal needs. Looking back through history, one thing becomes clear. So, was there celibacy in the days of the earliest ancient humans? Based on the evidence available today, there is no strong archaeological evidence that prehistoric hunter-gatherers practiced organized lifelong celibacy as a social or religious institution. However, there is every reason to believe that individuals sometimes lived without partners or experienced periods of abstinence because of personal circumstances, cultural customs, illness, separation, or other practical realities. In many ways, the story of celibacy is also the story of humanity itself. It reminds us that being human is not only about instinct. It is also about choice. And perhaps that is one of the greatest discoveries in all of human history. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of history's most fascinating questions. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more evidence-based documentaries exploring ancient humans, archaeology, history, and the origins of civilization. Because every question about our past brings us one step closer to understanding who we are today.